Ladies and gentlemen, the HDB has just announced a big announcement that there will be a 6 to 9% clawback of the transacted price when you sell a plus and prime flat. Now, how does that affect HDB BTOs moving forward? How it affect resale prices moving forward? So I think today we'll attempt to make an analysis of how much you can profit if you buy a prime BTO or a plus BTO and later sell it. This is an announcement that's also important not just for BTO buyers, but also for potential sellers of HDB flats, because all these flats will come into competition with you, condos as well, and most importantly, parents of children, they're going to apply for BTO so that you can advise them appropriately. So today is a very important analysis. Let's watch on, shall we? So effectively, a question that we attempt to answer all the way at the end of our So effectively, at the end of our talk today, we will answer the question, prime or plus flats, are they a good buy? Because right now there's a 6 to 9% clawback of the resale price. The BTO flats today has a new classification, okay, and they have been launched. Now there is a plus and prime flat, and they have a 6 to 9% subsidy recovery rate. This is quite high, and anecdotally, this is sending a shocker to some of the people. Let's see what the impact is. First of all, to help you recall, there are now 3 types of BTO flats. There's a standard, there's a plus and prime. Effectively, it simply means that those in very good location, nearest to central, near to MRT station, very good, these will be called prime. And this will receive the most subsidy when you buy the flat, and yet will be given the tightest restriction. There'll be a 10-year minimum occupation period, no whole flat rental for the whole 10-year period, and there'll be a subsidy recovery end of sale. Today, we know it's about 9%. In this time, this BTO, we are specifically looking at Kallang and Whampoa area. Then there is plus, also good location, not as prime location. Effectively, the conditions are almost the same, right? There's a 10-year NOP, no resale, no whole flat rental, subsidy recovery at end of the sale. And these are the areas that are subjected to this classification. These locations are pretty good as well, actually, to be frank, okay? And then there's standard, basically, don't have those kind of restriction, normal restriction that we used to for the last, 30, 40, 50 years of HDB history. So the question right now is this still a good buy? Because there's a huge clawback of 9%, right? So Kate, my daughter, is going to apply for this BTO exercise. So the question really is prime and plus still a good buy? What we did was that we did some calculations using 4-room flats. Since all the towns here have launched 4-room flats, we look at 4-room flat as a way of calculating. So interestingly, HDB also published the selling price, excluding grants, and also the recent transacted price of nearby flats as well. So this gives us a very good way to calculate. Not only that, they specifically highlight the subsidy recovery rate, right? So in Ang Mo Kio is 6%, Bedok is 7%, Geylang and Kallang is 8%, prime in Kallang and Whampoa is 9%, right? So they are very specific to the subsidy recovery percentage. So how do we calculate, right? They actually give us the resale prices, okay, and also the BTO prices. We know now there is a inherent subsidy, and we also know how much they will claw back. We did some analysis, and this is what it is. So to start off, we assume that in Crawford Heights, which is one of BTO on sale, we look at the cheapest flat you can buy. Right now, it's about 568,000. We also look at the resale prices that is on the low range as well for 4-room flats as well. So we buy cheap, we sell cheap. That's assuming there's no appreciation. It's an assumption, but I'll change the assumption later to look at what if there is appreciation. You bought at 568,000, assuming the overall Singapore flats do not rise in prices, okay? You will sell it later in the open market at 890,000. So you buy cheap, you sell cheap by standard. And then we also look at what if you buy expensive, but you also sell expensive. So you buy the most expensive BTO, which is 759,000, but you also sell at the most expensive price that you can get, which is 938,000. And then you check the range, right? So effectively, we're saying, I'll give you the lowest possible and we'll give you the highest possible. Anything else is in between. So what does the calculation tell us about the attractiveness of all these flats now with a subsidy clawback? Let's take a look. Right now, you were to look at it, the top of the chart here, we look at those standard flats, no clawback, right? These are the BTO selling prices. And these are the transacted prices today of nearby flats. If you immediately buy and sell, which you can't, but let's make the assumption that you can, right now you'll profit this amount, okay, this amount, ranging from about 130,000 all the way to 200,000. To be frank, most of it is 200,000. I would say Pasir Ris is pretty bad a deal, okay? You buy expensive and you sell somewhat a little bit more pricier, but the profits that you can get out of this is about 131,000. So if you calculate a CAGR, compound annual growth rate, based on this 5 years, this is what you get, right? On average, about 10%, which is the suckiest deal, which is Pasir Ris one, which is outlier. Let's ignore it right now. And most of them is about 10%, right? Which just basically reflect the huge jump you get, because government sell to you cheap, okay? So this one, we thank the government for it. But let's now look at prime and plus flats, right? So you have got those plus flats, Bedok and Ang Mo Kio, Geylang, Kallang Whampoa, all these are available right now. The subsidy clawback has been listed by the government, and this is the selling prices of the cheapest, okay, BTO there. And we also look at the transaction prices of the cheapest four-room flats nearby as well. And assuming you buy cheap, you sell cheap, this is what you get in terms of your profits, okay? This is probably a good reflection, roughly about 200,000, okay? And there are some places you can get 300,000, which is Kallang Whampoa at Towner Breeze. This requires you to hold on to the flat for 10 years, right? So the compound annual growth rate after 10 years is roughly about 3 to 5%. It's not bad. It's not bad. 3 to 5%, you get 200,000. So it's probably not as attractive in terms of compound annual growth rate, okay, relative to the standard ones. But in terms of absolute dollar, it's pretty attractive, right? It's pretty attractive. Can you get more money through standard flats? Possible, depending your choice and selection and things like that. But let's look at the prime one. The prime one, if you buy cheap and you sell cheap, you're also looking at about the same, right? And in fact, the CAGR is about the same, right? So standard flats is not so bad. Prime flats, effectively, government make it very clear that you can't profit so much from it anymore, okay? Prime and plus. But that's looking at the shittiest case where you buy cheap and you sell cheap. But everybody will think that, that's not going to happen to you. So let's look at the other extreme now. You buy expensive and sell expensive. Now, this is where the story have a very different picture. So if you buy expensive and you sell expensive, that's a reasonable assumption. In terms of what you can profit from standard flats, which is Bukit Batok, Jurong West, Pasir Ris, Sengkang, and Woodlands, you stay for 5 years. There's no subsidy clawback. You buy them roughly between 400 to 600,000, and you sell them about 200,000 over dollars more expensive, assuming no appreciation from overall price increase. Just the difference between resale and BTO, you get about 200,000, which is a CAGR of about 7 to 9%. Doesn't make as good returns as the previous case where you get 10%, but here you get about 8 to 9%. But what if you buy those prime and plus flats? Let's take a look at it. So you buy those prime plus flats, you stay for 10 years, you get subsidy clawback based on percentages that government calculate. And there you have, right? You buy at discount price ranging between 600,000 to 700,000, which is a hell of money for BTO, by the way. This double story masonette was just bought in about 10 years ago for 700,000. Now you buy a 4-room flat, okay? You then transact it at, wow, a stunning, 800 to $1 million. This is the stunning profits you can get. If you pick a not so good location, you even profit less than those standard ones. But if you get those good locations, you can get as high as 400,000, right? Now, prime one is the one that you probably can get a shitty deal for out of it. It's only 1% CAGR. So it's not so attractive from that sense, right? So this is a very important analysis. Doesn't mean prime is good and doesn't mean standard is bad, right? So I think this is a very important analysis to look at this whole concept, right? It's very important where you choose your house, okay? And it's very effectively for you to see the difference between the plus and prime. So from a desktop analysis, I think it's important that we pick the good location that has, at the current state right now, the biggest spread between the BTO price and the transacted prices of nearby flats. And that's not easy judgment, by the way. Where to buy in order to maximize the profit requires a lot of judgment call. I think one of the key important thing is to note that the current disparity between the BTO prices and the nearby transactor prices matters a lot, right? So you can see that in Crawford Heights, Whampoa, it's going to give you shitty returns, assuming there's no appreciation. And it's possible for you to gain tremendously a lot if the disparity between transacted flats are pretty high right now. There you can have a feel of it. Let's go on to analysis and then later we conclude. Now, a lot of you are going to say, Mr. Lu, it is not fair to assume resale flat prices will not grow. I agree. This is where we now throw in a conservative assumption. Now, we put in a 2% growth a year. Now, a lot of people say, Mr. Lu, you go slap yourself, right? My flat has been growing at 5, 10% every year, the kind of thing, right? So I know. Everybody's flat is best, right? Right now, it has been growing for the last few years phenomenally, but historically, between 2014 to 2024, the CAGR is about 3.3%. So let's assume that we are a bit more conservative, just in case things happen in the economy, right? And let's see the impact to the analysis. Now, going back to analysis right now, let's go back to the case where you buy cheap, sell cheap, right? So if we look at those standard flats, if you buy cheap, okay, and you buy cheap at, between 300 and 400,000, and you sell cheap, but with a 2% annual growth rate, on average, right, you will have a stunning returns of about, I would say, $200,000 to $300,000 after 5 years. And the CAGR is phenomenal. It's like 12%, right? Some of the case 16%. Pasir Ris is always a lousy location. So it's important that there's a telltale sign, right? If your disparity between a BTO price and resale price is very narrow, I advise you not to buy it, okay? But let's take a look at the plus flats, right? The plus flats right now in Ang Mo Kio, Bedok, Geylang, and Kallang Whampoa, you buy cheap, it's a relative term, cheap, at around 400 to 500,000, but you sell them cheap, but this time the cheap has a growth of 2% a year. You stand to profit a stunning, $300,000 to $500,000, okay? And the growth rate right now is about 5 to 7%. And interestingly, if we do the same exercise for Crawford Heights, which is a prime location, your returns is not so bad. Okay, it's not so bad because your flat price is expensive. 2% on expensive flat, grows phenomenally. So it's not so bad, right? So let's now take a look at the case where you buy expensive and sell expensive, right? So you pick those premium units and you sell them, expensive as well. So these are the premium units. I assume they're generally high floor, better facing, and all this kind of thing. And in those cases, your returns for the standard flats actually falls in CAGR, but the returns are pretty decent at 200 to 300,000, roughly the same. Your CAGR, your annual growth, compound annual growth rate is a bit lesser than the previous case. The other flats in the plus area, right now, we're looking at profit about, on average, 300 to over $500,000, right? And it is very attractive. Again, the shittiest case happened to be the one at Prime. I mean, this desktop analysis. So the plus flats are actually quite a good buy. The Prime flats sucks, in that analysis. Of course, right, you could say that, don't worry, Mr. I'll pick one that is cheap and I'll be able to sell them very expensive because I will find a way to dress up my flat and get the best agent and I'm a good seller or whatever, or dress up in renovation. That can happen. But let's talk about the typical case, right? You buy expensive, you sell expensive, you buy cheap, you sell cheap. So it looks like the case of the plus flat is quite a reasonable buy. In the case of the plus flats, is actually a good buy. It's a good buy, despite there is a 6 to 8% clawback. Again, right, the telltale sign is the disparity between BTO prices and the transacted prices. So to conclude, a desktop analysis seems to lead towards a case where if you want more profits in absolute dollar, buying plus flats, this seems to be a better choice. But if you want fast, quick money at a high CAGR, then standard flats is the way to go. You can realize the profits earlier and possibly change your house faster and realize those returns earlier. So the standard flats is not that bad a deal because they don't lock in. There's one important catch, right? Nobody really knows the transacted price in future because the plus and prime flats, okay, have also buyer restrictions. Ms. Tan from Orange Tea, which is a chief researcher and strategist, actually said that the prices in the long term for these flats under the new classification is still an unknown, right? There are a lot of factors that can live with it. We don't really know what's the impact to the resale prices. Could you still get as high a prices as now? So the key question really is, can future buyers afford to pay for resale plus and prime flat? as what the current price is. There is a restriction for buyers of plus and prime flats in future. Only families and singles who earn $14,000 or less a month can buy these flats on the resale prices. And for prime flats, the income cap is $14,000 for families and $7,000 for singles, right? And there is also a 30-month wait-out period for private property owners who wish to buy a prime or plus flats, compared to a 15 months for a resale flat. So there is a hell lot of restrictions, okay, hell lot of restrictions. In that sense, the buyer pool shrinks, demand shrinks, so we don't know those current transacted prices. With a 2% growth is indicative of what's going to happen, right? So I think that this is an important consideration, that the current flats prices in the open market may not be the flat prices that you can get in future. So in conclusion, assuming that there is no difference in the demand because Singaporeans are really very rich, even with those buyer restrictions, they somehow can come out with cash from parents, from somewhere. I would take the assumption that Singaporeans is very cash rich, even though the income may not be as high, or they will find a way to adjust their income so that they qualify for those flats, or they will get money from their parents and things like that, which Singaporeans have a lot of rich parents. I would take the assumption that the impact on the resale flats may not be that high, but I would certainly consider plus flat versus standard flat more. The prime flats, that's a different consideration. There's also another consideration that those super choice location of prime gives you a better quality of life, assumingly, because they're near to amenities, near to city center, near the MRT station, whatsoever. Those are intangibles that are very difficult to put a number dollar to it. But if you are just simply looking at capital gains, I think if you want quick money, it's not bad to take a look at standard flats. If you want big money, may not be faster growth, and you're willing to wait for it, I think the plus flats are not bad. And also try not to be cheapo and pick the cheap ones, cheap plus, because the returns are not so good. Be daring to pick the more expensive ones. Of course, it's holding the assumption that demand will not be affected in future. So I think this is my desktop analysis. I think it's open for debate. A lot of people will have different opinion. I'm happy to hear opinion. And please put in all your comments in the comment section in the YouTube, and also join us our Telegram channel, Lu1865. And remember, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in a day or two. Bye-bye.